Welcome to the Engerati studio live at European Utility Week. I'm Rose Bondoc and I'm joined now by Eric Dresselhuys, co-founder and EVP of Global Development at Silver Spring Networks.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. Can we just begin our conversation by looking at where the bulk of your business is at the moment, whether it's AMI deployment or smart city infrastructure?
Sure. Well, we're a networking provider for critical infrastructure, and in that realm, we really go where the market's going. So globally, the bulk of our business has been in smart grids and AMI, but the fastest growing part of the business has been in smart cities. And we see the move towards smart cities really continuing to catch momentum here in Europe and around the world.
Okay, and from your observations, which region of Europe or which city do you think is going to be the first to be sort of truly smart?
The true smart. The short answer is I don't know. I think Europe has done a lot to move ahead and to really lead in the development of smart cities. And I know from our experience in Paris and London, places like Copenhagen that are very progressive, and they've moved quite briskly. And since the people in Copenhagen are the happiest people in the world, and I'm going to attribute that to smart city developments. Yeah. But we also now see other parts of the world, particularly I would call out Asia, which had really been behind in many regards, putting a lot of effort and a lot of energy into the development of smart cities. And for some political and structural reasons, they tend to be able to move very quickly once they get going. So I think Asia would be the region I'd tell people to keep an eye out for in terms of large smart development.
And what kind of applications are gaining popularity?
Well, safety is, I think, always been important, but safety and safety-related applications and security-related applications, I think, are probably the thing that we get asked the most about these days. Whether it's basic citizen safety through improved lighting, or security for perimeter security and kind of shot warning and other things related to maybe as a reaction to some of the things that have happened around the world, unfortunate events in Paris and in the States. Governments are now becoming very, very sensitive to security and how these technologies can help improve security.
Okay. So just thinking about what you've been doing in Europe like the past year, you've been deploying your Starfish network in Stockholm.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more about that project?
Yeah, so it's an exciting project, and I think kind of building on a lot of the momentum that we've got going in Europe, where the complexity, kind of maybe as the backstory is, you have now a lot of attention going on to smart cities, a lot of the different applications, and yet those are done by different departments within a city's organization. So it's not that there is one person who's in charge of all of these applications. You have different departments and different groups within a city, citizen groups, government groups, private industry, that are all trying to get involved. And so there's not been any kind of coordinated platform for them to come into, and that's really where Starfish steps in. So we put up networking infrastructure and a data management infrastructure that allows all of these different people and different applications to move at their own pace. So lighting might be the first thing that people want to do, but then traffic control, then environmental monitoring, post-COP21. A lot of the large cities in Europe have made climate promises, and so they're saying, oh gosh, now we've said yes to that, how are we going to implement it? How can we monitor our progress? And so that kind of gives birth to a number of different applications, all which need networking, they all need to get their data, but they're not going to necessarily do that in a single stroke, kind of one big project. They're going to do it as dozens and dozens of individual projects that all have to move at their own pace.
So, what is the next 12 months looking like for Silver Spring? Where is your main focus? I know you mentioned Asia, and you've kind of had some successes there.
Yeah, I don't think it's a geographic question. There's so much activity happening here in Europe. There's a ton of activity in the US, Asia. I just came here to European Utility Week from having been in Brazil and Latin America for a week. So I'd say that geographically, the tide is rising and all of the boats are coming along with it. I do think that you're going to see more IoT, kind of broad IoT applications get brought into the mix with smart cities and smart utilities. And so maybe if I had to make one call for what the next year is going to look like, It's that these categories are all going to start to blur.
Okay.
And utilities are going to be doing city-like things, and cities are going to be doing utility-like things, and commercial enterprises are coming to the fold as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big theme at this conference. How can utilities develop services beyond electrons?
Right.
What would be your advice there?
I'd say start now. We've seen many utilities around the world have a great amount of success and do what they do well, which is to install and operate infrastructure and provide services with a very high level of reliability and a high level of security. And in a world where you have a lot of players, and every time you see a market estimate for IoT, the number seems to grow to some more unimaginable number. That just creates a lot of confusion. And I think utilities, if they can find a way to innovate and be creative, have an amazing brand to leverage as a reliable, responsible party who's going to be there a year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now.
I mean, what about the kind of arrival of new entrants, energy retailers?
Yeah. I think so. Well, some of them look like fly-by-night shops, but a lot of them are pretty credible, and I think they may reinvent what the business model looks like. So you could imagine somebody coming to an offer that combines smart network lighting with the energy to provide it. And that's, the energy part of it was historically within the utility or the retailer's domain. Now a third party comes in and really changes the shape of money. They're not selling you electricity anymore, they're selling you lighting as a service. And by the way, electricity is a part of that equation.
And what about the sort of game changers? We've seen a few coming, but what are we likely to see coming up?
Well, I think technology is going to be the catalyst for that game changing. So there have been a few that have come up, but I think a lot of the new energy stuff that's been talked about, certainly in the retail space, has been taking the same thing that was delivered before, and it's been a marketing or a financial model that's tried to change it, but it hasn't had that real underlying technology impetus to it. I think you're going to see that. I think you are seeing that change already, whether it's in the battery space or the solar space or in the IoT and kind of connectivity space. You're seeing people now leverage this technology to invent an entirely new way to present the business model. So I won't be the first or the last person to say it, but Uber and getting Uberized, as it were, in your business really comes from the fact that until everybody had a smartphone, Uber couldn't have existed.
Exactly, it was the enabler, wasn't it, that allowed it?
So Uber didn't invent the smartphone, they didn't invent the app, but their ability to entirely disrupt and transform an industry was facilitated by this underlying change in technology that had to happen first.
And what about creating sort of larger data platforms, say a pan-European energy data platform? Could you, visualize something like that with the way that utilities and suppliers are working at the moment? I
think in the medium to long term, yes. In the short term, I don't actually think it's going to happen. And you've even seen that happen in a lot of the city spaces. So cities today, many of the cities, Paris quite famously, but others, have created large data warehouses or data repositories that are very open to the outside world. And their hope is that people are going to come in and innovate on top of that platform by pushing all of the data out to the cloud. First off, you have to balance that versus privacy and safety concerns.
Yeah.
You probably are not going to be comfortable if somebody published all of your personally identifiable information into that cloud so that they could go market to you, as an example. The other piece is that you have a huge amount of very disparate data types. So there's some really interesting work that we've been fortunate to be involved in places like Bristol in the UK. Bristol is Open is a very innovative program that's trying to push that model forward. And I think they're learning and really doing some great innovation on how to make that data digestible. Because having just a huge pile of data in a big data warehouse, as it turns out, really isn't all that valuable if it isn't easy to access, if the data isn't secure and accurate, and very importantly, that you can't, unless you're assured that the data is the actual data that came in. One of the problems with data is it gets handled and muddled around, and by the time it's been touched 4 times, nobody's sure if it really is the same as the data that came out of the machine.
Yeah. So what's the advice then for data quality and making sure that you're actually extracting the
Well, I
right
think
stuff?
it's just real work. There is technology that's available to do that. It's just being executed in a new way across these kind of public forums now, and so somebody has to be in charge, right? And be the keeper of the system. That's not from a proprietary perspective. It's not saying that it's my data or it's your data, but somebody has to be the keeper of the data to ensure that the data is safe, secure, and clean.
And are we likely to see like the Uber of energy coming up anytime soon? Is that
Yeah, I think so.
is a possibility?
I think it's a possibility, and I think you'll see it. It'll start slow. It'll sneak up from behind you, and by the time you really recognize it's there, it'll be too late.
We'll end on that note.
Thank you.
Eric. Thanks for your time. And just remember, you can watch the rest of the interviews from European Utility Week on the Engerati YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.